The Big Ten better buckle up, let me tell you, because today a massive move was made where Jim Knowles, the best defensive coordinator in the country in my mind, his move from Ohio State to Penn State might be the biggest move that the Big Ten Conference has seen in the 21st century. And I pause and am very careful with my words because that's a very big statement. Incredibly big statement right there. The biggest coaching move of the 21st century. I don't even know if that's entirely accurate, but it's certainly in the ballpark. And if Penn State wins a national championship with Jim Knowles as their defensive coordinator and or Ohio State has a little bit of a step back, I think the hiring that James Franklin and Pat Kraft just pulled off, taking Jim Knowles away from a school that they have not beaten since 2016, is a pretty big deal. Never in my life would I have believed that a celebrated NFL caliber, just in his own league defensive coordinator like Jim Knowles would leave Ohio State after winning the national championship to coach for Penn State, who Ryan Day is 6-0 against. 6 straight up wins, no losses, and if we're being very honest about it, Ohio State was in control in all of those games. Think about that. Think about it and meditate on it. Jim Knowles, who shut down elite offenses all season and all of last season, the mastermind behind Ohio State's elite defense, is now wearing blue and white. He's jumped ship to Penn State, and with how college football works now, when the spring portal window opens up, maybe he takes some Ohio State players. It's not unheard of. I mean, I don't think anyone expected this to happen, for Penn State to pay $3.1 million to Jim Knowles over 3 years, and he comes to Penn State. If anyone would have said that a week ago, I think everyone would have laughed, or at least 99% of people, and I would have been in the 99%. This is the same man who fixed Ohio State's defense in 2 years, brought it from a Kerry Combs, Matt Barnes ruined unit that had talent but was very unfundamentally sound, if that's even a word that can be used. And within 2 years, they were fielding an elite unit. They held Notre Dame to 14, Penn State to 12, Michigan to 30, and Missouri to 14 in 2023. And they held Penn State to 6 this year, not counting that pick 6, Indiana to 15, Tennessee to 17, Oregon to 21, Texas to 14, and Notre Dame to 23. And now he's tasked with elevating an elite Nittany Lions defense. Elite in talent, elite in assistant coaching. Tom Allen was a little bit questionable as a defensive coordinator. His move to Clemson upgraded Clemson's defensive staff and their potential. And I said that I thought that move was a win-win for both Clemson and Penn State because I believed Penn State would upgrade their defensive coordinator. They have. They now have the nation's best defensive coordinator. So I want to talk about what this means for the balance of power in the Big Ten, because this could certainly shake some things up, how his game plan evolves with this new team, any potential broad changes I'm going to be learning about, how he will operate with Penn State, as you all will, because I didn't expect this move to happen. And of course, will this make Penn State the team to beat in 2025? Because Penn State's returning the vast majority of their starters. They're bringing back a lot on the offensive side of the ball and losing a lot more on defense. But now I'd say they have the best defensive coordinator and probably the best defensive staff in all of college football. So let's break it down. And just very quickly, I want to give you all a reminder to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell if you haven't already, and comment your thoughts down below. Join our Discord server via the link in the description or pinned comment. If you want to support the channel, there's links to my Patreon page and merchandise store in the pinned comment and also the description. And I highly advise you to hit the notification bell so that way you can get notified when we go live Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern time. I know that this video is not being recorded on a Monday or Wednesday, but that's because there's things I want to talk about. I have the additional time, and Jim Knowles being hired away is definitely breaking news. That is a nuclear explosion in Hiroshima or Nagasaki moment for college football. It's groundbreaking. So I want to talk about that right now and really dive in. And first and foremost, we'll get to that in a few minutes. I'm just very excited, so that's why I nearly jumped ahead there. Just some facts and information about Jim Knowles that I want to discuss briefly. He spent 3 years with the Ohio State Buckeyes, and he's fielded 2 top 3 defenses in those 3 seasons. 2022 is a little bit of a transition period. For much of the year, it looked like they were going to have a top 10, maybe even top 5 unit at times. But the Penn State game showed some cracks. The Michigan game blew that defense wide open, and Georgia did the same thing in the Peach Bowl. But in 2023, the defense was top 3. I personally would argue it is top 2, but statistics don't say it was definitively top 2. It was in that number 3, number 2 range behind Michigan that year. And in 2024, in my opinion, he fielded another top 2 unit. Analytics say number 1. I think Texas's defense, when both teams faced off, was the more impressive unit. But that's just a 1-game sample size. I think Ohio State overall for the whole year was the most impressive defense, certainly the most well-coached defense, most fundamentally sound unit, perfect at tackling. The pass rush evolved as the season went on. And speaking of pass rush, his Oklahoma State defense in 2021 was second in the nation, I believe, in sacks per game. He's reportedly receiving $3.1 million over 3 years to be the Nittany Lions defensive coordinator, and he will be coordinating a defense that returns 14 two-deep players, including stars like Tony Roas at linebacker, or A.J. Harris at corner, Denai Dennis Sutton at D-end, Zane Durant at defensive tackle, and there are other players in that two-deep, or maybe even some third-stringers, some younger freshmen who, given Knowles' history of elite talent evaluation, could have breakout seasons this coming year. So this is a very, very impactful hire. But I have seen people talk about Jim Knowles like maybe the talent at Ohio State carried him a bit. And it certainly helps when you have Larry Johnson and Tim Walton recruiting for you, when you have James Laurinaitis, who's been an awesome linebackers coach, I think one of the best in the business at the linebackers coach with Ohio State. But I don't think this bears out. And I want to go back to 2021 for a few minutes here and briefly discuss Jim Knowles' 2021 defense. Then we'll discuss all his defenses since then. In his 4th year with Oklahoma State, he commanded a defense that only allowed 18.2 points per game, which was 10th. 0.271 opponent points per play, 10th. 290.2 opponent yards per game, 4th. 4.3 yards per play, 4th. Also 4th in opponent yards per carry, only allowing 2.6. 19th in opponent yards per pass attempt, allowing 6.5. 25th in opponent yards per completion, allowing 11.2. And they had a 10.87 sack percentage on defense, which was 3rd. And they earned 8.36 tackles for loss per game, which was 1st. They were an aggressive unit. They were a unit that shut down in large part Lincoln Riley's offense with Caleb Williams kind of at their peak in 2021. And they did a very impressive job all throughout 2021. Obviously, in the bowl game, they faced off against Notre Dame and allowed 35 points, but Knowles was not the defensive coordinator in the bowl game. Another fact that ties with Penn State is Jim Knowles, before he faced off against Penn State this year, was the only defensive coordinator in the country to not allow a single touchdown to an Andy Kotelnicki offense. They only allowed, I believe, 6 points to Kansas in 2021, and then the defense only allowed 6 points to Penn State, where Kotelnicki was the OC, in 2024. So the only defensive coordinator who historically can stop Andy Kotelnicki is now on the same staff as Andy Kotelnicki. It gets even better, though. 2022's defense for Ohio State was a paper tiger. It was not nearly the same paper tiger it was in 2020 or 2021, but it still was. In his first year with Ohio State, Knowles' defense allowed 21 points per game at the end of the year, 17th. They allowed 42 to Georgia, 45 to Michigan, seemingly a billion rushing yards to both of them, and Stetson Bennett averaged like 11 yards per pass attempt. You see that in the fact that Ohio State was 82nd in opponent yards per completion, allowing 12.3, 67th in opponent yards per pass attempt, allowing 7.2. They were pretty good, though, for much of the year at stopping the run, allowing 3.5 yards per carry. And mind you, in the Michigan game, they basically shut down Michigan's rushing offense for 2.5 quarters. But the big plays forced Knowles to adjust, and that opened up the ground game a little bit. Also, Michigan that year was a second-half team. Ohio State only allowed 5 yards per play, 29th. 321.5 opponent yards per game, 12th. And 0.325 opponent yards per play, which was 29th. Their sack percentage was 8.63%. It was 15th. Part of that was because the defense was very aggressive. He adjusted, Knowles did, and became a much more conservative play caller in 2023. And Ohio State earned about 6.62 tackles for loss per game that year. The defense started off very hot, and the signs that they were going to be an elite unit in 2023 were there. It's part of the reason why I predicted them to be an elite unit in 2023 and was proven correct. But they were a little bit of a ways away. Then 2023 comes around, and it's the second year with a very complex system, and not only that, but Ohio State defensively was kind of broken by the time that 2022 came around. They needed a little bit of a rebuild. They couldn't just reload. Well, in 2023, they reloaded the shotgun, and they were just burying people with lead all season long. They only allowed 11.6 points per game, second. 0.175 opponent points per play, also second. 268.3 opponent yards per game, which is third. And you will see that a lot of these numbers were actually superior to the numbers that Ohio State had in 2024. Knowles hasn't just fielded an elite defense full of super seniors and some graduates and Caleb Downs. Last year's defense was generationally good too. You can purchase ESPN Plus or maybe find, some illicit way around the paywall and look at Bill Connolly's review of the 2023 season, and it wasn't only Michigan's defense or Penn State's or Iowa's that was described as generational last year. Ohio State's was too. And Ohio State's defense last year did not have the shine that Michigan's or Penn State's did. They had a lot better pass rushers and I would say more alien players. But what I can tell you is they were more fundamentally sound than Penn State's defense. They were more talented, certainly, than Iowa's defense. And they didn't allow the same big plays that Michigan's defense did. I mean, that unit in 2023 would not allow anyone to hit a big play on them. It was impossible. They only allowed 4.1 opponent yards per play, third. 3.5 opponent yards per carry, 19th. 5 opponent yards per pass attempt, first. That's insanity. 9.7 opponent yards per completion, again, insane. That was second. Their sack percentage and tackles for loss per game were much lower, but that was in part because this team rarely ever blitzed. They kept everything in front of them. 6.91% sack percentage, 49th, and only 5.54 tackles for loss per game, which was 73rd. And in the beginning of 2024, Knowles had kind of the same game plan that he did in 2023 for much of 2024. But adjustments had to be made because the corners weren't as good as they were in 2023. The corners were not as disciplined in coverage. They were much grabbier, but the D-line was more experienced. Safety was upgraded, and therefore as the year went on, and especially after the Oregon game, he made adjustments. In his third year with Ohio State, the Buckeyes only allowed under Knowles 12.9 points per game, first. 0.202 points per play, first. 254.9 yards per game, first. 4 yards per play, first. 2.7 opponent yards per carry and under 90 rushing yards per game, second. And only 6 yards per attempt, 10th, and 10 yards per completion, third. They were first in defensive sack percentage, getting a sack on about 10.71% of their opponent's dropbacks, which is just insane, especially as the year progressed. When in the playoffs, Ohio State didn't blitz all that much in terms of sending, 6 or 7 guys. They typically only sent sometimes 3, 4, 5, and they'd still get home because of the amazing pass rushers they had. And also Cody Simon, who I think Knowles had a heavy hand in along with James Laurinaitis. And Ohio State only got 7.06 tackles for loss per game. I say only as if that's small. That's quite a bit. And they bullied offensive lines in the playoff. They bullied Penn State's elite offensive line in the regular season. Jim Knowles is the real deal. That's all I'm trying to say. This was an absolute bombshell of a hire. Anyone who tells you this does not hurt Ohio State is lying, because even if they make an elite hire or a near elite hire or even just a great one, well, obviously if they make just a great one, no matter what Ohio State does, they will have a downgraded defensive coordinator next year. No matter what, like just straight up. And Penn State, they have the nation's best DC. I mean, the guy at Oklahoma State, every year the defense basically got better. And in year 4, it was really, really good. In the COVID year, where no one could tackle to save their life, they actually had, a good defense. Sometimes susceptible to big plays, but good defense overall. The 2022 defense, that defense surrendered a lot of big plays. But the 2023 defense, that unit, you could not do. The only way you were going to beat them is you had to move methodically down the field perfectly and be good at running up the middle. You did those things, you could move the 2023 defense. But if you can do those things at a high level, you can basically move any defense just a little bit and just a little bit. And then this season, it's kind of the same thing, except they allowed a little bit more big plays through the passing attack, and I blame that mainly on the corners. I think Burke has been up and down throughout his whole career. Amazing in 21 and 23, pretty bad in 2022, good this year, but not as good as he was in 2023, for example. And Igbinosun has a lot of work to do, let's say. So, honestly, this is the best hire that Penn State could have made on the defensive side of the ball. I think, of course, that Penn State needs to upgrade at wide receiver, and I think they need to be better at quarterback. I think Drew Aller needs to be more accurate. He needs to be more poised. It'd be helpful to Penn State if he was more mobile. But this was huge. This helps Penn State's chances to finally beat Ohio State or win the Big Ten or win the national championship. I mean, my reaction of this in sum is that he's the nation's best defensive coordinator, and because Penn State's not broken defensively in the way that Ohio State was when he got there, or in the way that any school with Oklahoma State's talent is, they'll improve. I don't think they're going to have a down year on defense. Of course, will it be as good as this past Ohio State defense or the defense before that? I don't know, and I'd probably lean toward no, because those units were loaded, particularly the 2024 one, when you have like an alien in Caleb Downs and a super senior in Jack Sawyer, who's just a phenomenal player, and same with like that entire D-line, much of the linebackers, sections of the secondary too. But I do think most positions for Penn State are going to improve performance-wise. I think that with Zane Durant back at defensive tackle and the depth they have there, you're going to see improvement. I think at linebacker, with Kobe King leaving, that hurts. But Knowles has been involved with linebackers at Ohio State before in his previous stops. He's done very well coaching that position. I would expect Tony Rowe to take a huge step forward, and same with anyone in that group. I think A.J. Harris is going to be a superstar next year. I think that whether it's a Davian Collins or Elliott Washington, they're going to benefit from his scheme. And Knowles, another thing about him is it's linebackers and safeties. That's his specialty. And Zakee Wheatley coming back is huge. Zion Tracy returning at the line position is big. I think that, of course, with Abdul Carter leaving, D-end is going to regress a little bit, at least right D-end, where Abdul Carter lined up typically. But overall, it's an A-plus hire. I mean, 100 out of 100 on the report card, plus some extra credit for James Franklin and Pat Kraft. This was an elite hire, and Ohio State now must act fast because they're super late in the cycle. I mean, they can get someone, maybe an assistant from the NFL, not a D coordinator probably, although they have the money to where maybe they could pull that off. But whether it's an assistant coach from the NFL or they promote internally, or maybe they send a bunch of money to a college DC, they got to act fast, and no matter what, they're regressing, and Penn State caused that. And Penn State is the benefit of it directly because they hired Jim Knowles. So I don't know what else to tell you other than the fact that this is a big deal. This is news. I mean, this is something that, again, a week ago, would any of you have thought that Jim Knowles would leave a national champion for Penn State who can't win big games? I don't think so. I do not think so. Ultimately, I think Ohio State's still going to be a really, really good team in 2025, a near elite team, and I think the same of Penn State. So it's going to be interesting to see how this changes, if it changes at all, the balance of power in the Big Ten. But for Penn State, this is as close to they can get to a natty or bust season. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also hit that notification bell so that way you can get notified when new content from College Football with Sam drops. I appreciate you very much, and also share the video around to others who you know enjoy the sport of college football and love it as I do and as you do, and comment your thoughts down below so that we can have a conversation, because I want to know what you are thinking. And join our Discord server where we talk college football 24/7 via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Thank you to my Heisman Patreon members, Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, and Carlo OH. Thank you to my All-American Patreon members, Chris Lane, Ismar, and Tyler Nye. And thank you to my All-Conference members, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus. Make sure to check out my merchandise store and or Patreon page, or super chat down in the comment section below to support the channel. The Patreon page and merchandise store links are in the description or down below in the pinned comment. I hope you have a wonderful day. It is December, so Merry Christmas and also Happy New Year. I will see you guys soon.